Welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. Karen, Darlene, Marianne, Dorothy Joy, Maggie, John Mahoney, Carla Atkinson, Rich, Rhonda, Ann Newhall, SR. Very good to be with you. I was thinking of Tom Wolfe today. Really admired Tom Wolfe. Great writer, great cultural figure. In any event, maybe when he wrote about stock car racing, Junior Johnson, but I mean, The Right Stuff, which of course came out in 1973. 1973? Maybe even a little, of course, Tangerine, it's 1978, the candy-colored Tangerine Flake Streamlined Baby. 1979, forgive me, of course. And it's about the original pilots who broke the speed limit and became
The speed
space
limit.
program. What did I say?
The speed limit? You're thinking about me when I drive.
No judgment.
Sorry.
Shattered the sound barrier. Chuck Yeager. But listen to this wonderful beginning of the book. Pete Conrad, some of you might remember, as an astronaut. He was married to Jane Conrad. Walked on the moon, ultimately. Listen to how The Right Stuff begins. Chapter called The Angels. Put yourself in this frame of mind. Within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, no more than that, 3 of the others had called her on the telephone to ask her if she had heard that something had happened. Jane, this is Alice. Listen, I just got a call from Betty, and she said she heard something's happened out there. Have you heard anything? That was the way they phrased it, call after call. She picked up the telephone and began relaying the same message to some of the others. Connie, this is Jane Conrad. Alice just called me, and she says something's happened out there. Something was part of the official wife lingo for tiptoeing blindfolded around the subject. Being barely 21 years old and new around here, Jane Conrad knew very little about this particular subject since nobody ever talked about it. The day was young. And what a setting she had for her imminent enlightenment. And what a picture she herself presented. Jane was tall and slender and had rich brown hair and high cheekbones and wide brown eyes. She looked a little like the actress Jean Simmons. Her father was a rancher in southwestern Texas. She'd gone east to college to Bryn Mawr and met her husband, Pete, at a debutante's party at Gulf Mill Club in Philadelphia when he was a senior at Princeton, too. Pete was a short, wiry, blond boy who joked around a lot. At any moment, his face was likely to break into a wild grin, revealing the gap between his front teeth. The Hickory Kid, sort of. He was a Hickory Kid on the Deb circuit, however. He had an air of energy, self-confidence, ambition, joie de vivre.
Très bien.
Ah, merci. Jane and Pete were married 2 days after he graduated from Princeton. Last year, Jane gave birth to their first child, Peter, and today here in Florida, in Jacksonville. In the peaceful year 1955, the sun shines through the pines outside and the very air takes on the sparkle of the ocean. The ocean and a great mica white beach are less than a mile away. Anyone driving by will see Jane's little house gleaming like a dream house in the pines. It's a brick house, but Jane and Pete painted the bricks white so it gleams in the sun against a great green screen of pine trees with 1,000 little places where the sun peeks through. They painted the shutters black, which makes the white walls look even more brilliant. Around 30 minutes on such a circuit, a wife begins to feel that the telephone is no longer located on a table or in the kitchen. It is exploding in her solar plexus. Yet it would be far worse right now to hear the front doorbell. Protocol strict on the point, although written down nowhere. No woman is supposed to have to deliver the final news, and certainly not on the telephone. The matter mustn't be bungled. That's the idea. A man should bring the news when the time comes. A man with some official or moral authority, a clergyman, or a comrade of the newly deceased. Furthermore, he should bring the news, the bad news, in person. He should turn up at the front door and ring the bell and be standing there like a pillar of coolness and competence, bearing the bad news on ice like a fish. Therefore, all the telephone calls from the wives were the frantic and portentous beating of the wings of the death of the angels, as it were. When the final news came, there would be ring at the front door. A wife in this situation finds herself staring at the front door as if she no longer owns it or controls it. And outside the door would be a man come to inform her that unfortunately something has happened out there. And her husband's body now lies incinerated in the swamps or the pines or the palmetto grass, burned beyond recognition, which anyone who's been around an airbase very long realized was quite an artful euphemism to describe a human body that now looked like an enormous fowl that had been burned up in a stove. All the hair and the ears burned off, not to mention all the clothing, but also the hands and feet. This gentleman, this ornamentum of some mother's eye. My own husband, how could this be? What they were talking about. Jane had heard the young man, Pete among them, talk about other young men who had bought it, or augured in, or crunched. But it had never been anyone they knew, no one in the squadron. In any event, the way they talked about it with such breezy, slangy terminology was the same way they talked about sports. It's as if they were saying he was thrown out stealing second base. And that was all, not one word, not in print, not in conversation, not in this amputated language about an incinerated corpse from which a young man's spirit has vanished in an instant, from which all smiles, gestures, moods, worries, laughter, wiles, shrugs, tenderness, and loving looks disappeared like a sigh, while the terror consumes a cottage in the wood, and a young woman sizzling with fever awaits her confirmation as the new widow of the day. The next series of calls greatly increased the possibility that it was Pete to whom something had happened. There were only 20 men in the squadron. Soon 9 or 10 had been accounted for by the fluttering reports of the death angels. Knowing that the word was out that an accident had occurred, husbands who could get to the telephone were calling home to say, "It wasn't me." This news, of course, was immediately fed to the fever. Jane's telephone would ring once more, one of the wives saying, "Nancy just got a call from Jack. He's at the squadron. He says something's happened, but he doesn't know what. He said he saw Frank D. take off about 10 minutes ago with Greg in the back, so they're all right. What have you heard?" But Jane had heard nothing, except that other husbands and not hers were safe and accounted for, and thus on a sunny day in Florida, outside of the Jacksonville Naval Air Station in a little white cottage, a veritable dream house, and the beautiful young woman was about to be apprised of the quid pro quo of her husband's line of work. There's the trade-off, one might say, the sub-paragraphs of a contract written in no visible form. Just as surely if she had the entire roster in front of her, Jane now realized that only 2 men in the squadron were unaccounted for. One was a pilot named Bud Jennings. The other was Pete. She picked up the phone and did something that was much frowned on in a time of emergency. She called the squadron office. The duty officer answered. "I want to speak to Lieutenant Conrad," said Jane. "This is Mrs. Conrad." "I'm sorry," the duty officer said, and then his voice cracked. "I'm sorry, He couldn't find the words. He was about to cry. He can't come to the phone." "He can't come to the phone? It's very important," said Jane. I'm sorry, it's impossible. The duty officer could hardly get the words out because he was so busy gulping back sobs. He can't come to the phone. Why not? Where is he? I'm sorry. More sighs, more wheezes. Sniffling. Gasps. I can't tell you that. I have to hang up now. The duty officer, the very sound of her voice was more than he could take. The world froze, congealed in that moment. Jane could no longer calculate the interval before the front doorbell would ring and some competent, long-faced figure would appear, some friend of widows and orphans. It would inform her officially that Pook was dead. I'm going to read a little more. Do you know what's going to happen?
Well, we knew his second wife, so I think I do.
Nancy, yeah.
Yes.
What's their last name?
Conrad. Okay.
Even out in the middle of a swamp in this rot bog of pine trunks, scum slicks, what a writer, dead dodder vines and mosquito eggs. See why I don't like nature? Even out in this great overripe sump, the smell of burn beyond recognition obliterated everything. When the airplane fuel exploded, it created a heat so intense that everything but the hardest metals, wood, leather, cloth, flesh, gristle, calcium, horn, hair, blood, and protoplasm, not only burned, it gave up the ghost in the form of every stricken, putrid gas. As the helicopter came down between the pine trees and settled onto the bogs, the smell hit Pete Conrad, even before the hatch was completely open. They were not even close enough to see the wreckage yet. The rest of the way, Conrad and his crewmen had to travel on foot. After a few steps, the water was up to their knees, and then it was up to their armpits, and they kept wading through the water and the scum and the vines and the pine trunks. Conrad, a 25-year-old lieutenant junior grade, happened to be on duty as squadron safety officer that day and was supposed to make the on-site investigation of the crash. The fact was, however, that this squadron was the first duty assignment of his career. He'd never been at a crash site before. When Conrad finally reached the plane, he found the fuselage buried and blistered and dug into the swamp, with one wing sheared off and the cockpit canopy smashed. In the front seat was all that was left of his friend, Bud Jennings. An amiable fellow, a promising young fighter pilot who was now a horrible roasted hulk with no head. I'm not going to read the rest of that sentence.
No, please.
Conrad stood there, soaking wet in the swamp bog, wondering what the hell to do. It was a struggle to move 20 feet in this freaking muck. Every time he looked up, he was looking into a delirium of limbs, vines, dappled shadow, and a chopped up white light that came through the treetops, the ubiquitous screen of trees with the 1,000 little places where the sun peeked through. I'm going to go ahead a little. In keeping with the protocol, the squadron commander was not going to release Bud Jennings' name until his widow, Loretta, had been located and a competent death messenger had been dispatched to tell her. But Laura Jennings was not at home and could not be found, hence a delay and more than enough time for the other wives, the death angels, to burn with panic over the telephone lines. All the pilots were accounted for except the two who were in the woods, Bud Jennings and Pete Conrad. One chance in two. AC-doocy. Loretta Jennings had been out at a shopping center. When she returned home, a certain figure was waiting outside. A man, solemn friend of widows and orphans, And it was Loretta Jennings who lost the game of odd and even. And it was Loretta whose child she was pregnant with the second, but have no father. It was this young woman who went through all the final horrors that Jane Conrad had imagined would be hers to endure forever. Yet this grim stroke of fortune brought Jane little relief. On the day of Bud Jennings' funeral, Pete went into the back of the closet and brought out his bridge coat per regulations. This was the most stylish item in the Navy officer's wardrobe. Pete had never had an occasion to wear his before. Double-breasted coat made of navy blue Melton cloth and came down almost to the ankles. It must have weighed 10 pounds. It had a double row of gold buttons down the front and loops for the shoulder boards. Big, beautiful belly-cut collar and lapels, deep turnbacks of the sleeves. Never would Pete, or for that matter, many other American males in the mid-20th century, ever have an article of clothing quite so impressive and aristocratic as this coat. At the funeral, Navy boys lined up manfully in their bridge coats. They looked so young, their pink, lineless faces with their absolutely clear, lean jawlines popped up bravely, correctly out of the enormous belly-cut collars of the bridge coats. They sang an old Navy hymn which slipped into a strange and lugubrious minor key here and there, and included a stanza added especially for aviators. It ended, "Oh, hear us when we lift our prayer for those in peril in the air."
What a beautiful reading.
Yeah.
Now, S.R. O'Brien asked, did you ever interview Tom Wolfe?
Yes, a couple of times. I loved him. Worshipped him.
Oh, I remember you did his last book.
Yeah, but it turned out to be his last book. Yeah, loved him. Thought he was great. Big influence on me. Well, don't compare our writing, but big influence on me. So thanks very much for being with us. Sung at my dad's funeral? Oh, that hymn sung at your dad's funeral, Karen. Oh, God bless. Yeah, I know. I might read a little more at Tom Wolfe later on, if that's all right, because there are lots of sections in here. Chuck Yeager, breaking the speed limit.
I can't. I broke the speed limit once. Have you? Maybe that's why they don't let me talk anymore.
So what put it in my mind today, of course, was I'd interviewed Eileen Collins, the first woman to pilot and command a spacecraft.
Not Katy Perry.
Not Katy Perry, yes, and firework though. And
left shoulder.
And there was a very moving part, and she said it was difficult for her to watch. Her daughter recollecting when she worried if she'd come back space. And this was just test pilot stuff. Can I show my phone cover?
Of course.
So it is, of course, Les Grands Chats, we call it, right? Okay. So it is a famous French painting by Seurat.
A little more in. Thank you.
Famous French painting by Seurat. We love France. It hangs in the Art Institute of Chicago. We love Chicago. And it inspired Stephen Sondheim to write a musical.
And there's a lovely black dog in the foreground.
And there's a lovely black dog in the background.
You're not gonna name that tune?
Well, I mean,
Sunday.
putting it together. Sunday in the Park with George. So thanks very much for being with us. Finishing the chat. He is so quick. Oh, good point, Listen. So thanks very much for being with us on our open book. I think we're away tomorrow, but we'll be back on
Wednesday.
See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.